Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really going deep, diving into all this fascinating stuff about mindsets.
Fixed in growth, right.
Yeah, exactly. Using Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, I know you were really curious about how these mindsets play out, not just, for your own success, but also in relationships, even in the workplace.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how much Dweck's work has really influenced, I guess, all those different areas.
Right. Okay, so let's just jump right in. So we've got fixed mindset, which
hmm
basically says, like, intelligence or talent is just kind of set in stone. And then there's growth mindset, which says, hey, those things are more like skills. You can develop them.
It's really all about whether, like, deep down, you believe that you can fundamentally change, not just get a little bit better at what you've already got.
I see. So you mentioned you're curious about, like, how much someone's childhood, kind of predicts how successful they'll be later on.
Hmm.
And Dweck uses some pretty interesting examples to show that it's not always clear cut. Like she talks about Darwin and Tolstoy, and they were actually seen as pretty ordinary kids.
Which is wild when you think about how influential they became. It really makes you question that whole idea of, like, you're either born a genius or you're not. And there are tons more examples, like Ben Hogan, the golfer,
Hmm.
total uncoordinated as a kid. And even Cindy Sherman, and she's like this super famous photographer, failed her first photography class.
Wow. So you're saying, like, maybe potential is kind of hidden a lot of the time,
Yeah,
even from the person themselves.
I think so, yeah.
But I mean, don't you think some people are just naturally drawn to certain fields no matter how much effort they put in? Like, could someone with absolutely zero musical talent become, a concert pianist, even if they practice like crazy?
That is a great question, and it's something that Dweck really tackles head on. And she says it's not just about, like, positive thinking. It's about how we interpret those inevitable challenges. So, a fixed mindset kind of sees failure as proof that, okay, this is a limit. This is as far as I can go. But a growth mindset, they'll see that failure as, I guess, data, like information they can use to adjust their approach and figure out, okay, what do I need to do differently? And this is where accurate self-assessment comes in.
So someone with a growth mindset is going to be more likely to really look at their weaknesses. Like,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, exactly. They're open to feedback, even if it's, not all sunshine and rainbows, because they see it as a valuable tool to help them improve. But for someone stuck in that fixed mindset, every little bit of feedback feels like a judgment of their worth. It's personal.
Makes sense.
And they might even go so far as to distort information just to maintain this sense of, like, I'm smart, I'm talented.
Like, they're so busy trying to protect their ego, they're missing out on actual opportunities to grow.
Exactly. Dweck even calls it a kind of self-deception. And it can be really, really damaging to, their learning and development.
Wow. Okay, now you also mentioned being curious about how all this affects our relationships, right? And Dweck has this, I guess, this story about a couple who have totally different views on, what makes a successful relationship.
Right, right. The husband, he was all about acceptance, just loving each other unconditionally, flaws and all. But the wife, she felt like, you got to confront problems. Like, that's how you grow.
So basically, every time they had a conflict, they were coming at it from completely different angles.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, can you imagine? The husband felt attacked every time the wife tried to bring something up, and the wife felt totally unheard when he just wanted to sweep it all under the rug.
I can see how that would lead to some serious communication breakdowns.
Yeah.
It almost makes me think about, we'll come back to how you can actually spot these mindset clashes in your own life. But first, let's switch gears and talk about the workplace for a minute. I know you're particularly interested in how mindsets play out in a business setting. And I think Dweck's idea of CEO disease is pretty relevant here.
And by the way, it's definitely not just CEOs, It can be anyone who's kind of reached a certain level of success and is now, like, terrified of losing that image of being, perfect and all-knowing. They become so risk-averse that they actually end up almost stifling innovation and progress.
You're saying they're so afraid to make a mistake that they don't even try anything new?
Yeah, exactly. And Dweck uses Lee Iacocca as a prime example. He had those amazing early successes at Chrysler, but then,
Okay.
well, after those big wins, he basically stopped taking risks. Like, he just kept churning out the same old car models with just tiny little changes because he was, so afraid of admitting any kind of mistake. It's like that fear of failure kind of became a self-fulfilling prophecy, and ultimately led to his downfall.
Okay, so then how do we avoid this trap? Dweck contrasts Iacocca with Darwin Smith, who led Kimberly Clark to some, like, wild success. And his whole approach was completely different.
Oh, totally. Smith was amazing. He had this great saying, I never stopped trying to be qualified for the job. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Like, even after achieving incredible things, he was still humble. He stayed dedicated to continuous learning.
So instead of needing to appear perfect, he was constantly trying to improve.
Right. And it's such a stark contrast to that, I'm the smartest guy in the room attitude you often see with, some leaders. And that kind of leads into this fascinating study that really dug into these contrasting leadership styles. Researchers looked at what they called Enron-type managers versus Wurzel-type managers.
Okay, I get the Enron reference.
Yeah.
But who are the Wurzel types?
Oh, that's actually based on, like, this fictional CEO who's known for being really collaborative and focused on, long-term growth. The researchers weren't actually studying real people. They were kind of manipulating mindsets and, like, a group of business students.
So they created these Enron managers by basically inducing a fixed mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
And did those students start acting like they already knew everything?
Pretty much. They totally prioritized their own egos and got really focused on those short-term gains instead of building a strong team or fostering real growth. The Wurzel types, though, they were all about collaboration, learning from mistakes, really developing their team's potential.
Wow. So it seems like mindset can make a huge difference, even when the actual skills and knowledge are, kind of similar.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, do you think we ever see a blend of these mindsets in successful leaders? Like maybe someone who's super confident but also open to learning?
That's a really good question, and I think it gets at, the complexity of how these mindsets actually play out in the real world. It's probably pretty rare to find someone who's purely fixed or purely growth in every area of their life.
So maybe it's more of a spectrum.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. We all have areas where we kind of lean towards one mindset or the other, and those tendencies can shift depending on the situation.
Okay. Now, you were also really interested in seeing how all this plays out in the world of sports. I mean, that whole idea of natural talent is so huge in athletics. But does mindset really make that much of a difference?
This is where things get super interesting. Dweck uses the story of Billy Beane, the baseball guy from Moneyball, to show how, a fixed mindset can actually hold back even insanely gifted athletes.
Wait, but wasn't Bean, considered a natural?
He was. Scouts were convinced he was going to be the next Babe Ruth. But, he had this deep-seated fear of failure. That's a classic sign of a fixed mindset. As soon as things started going wrong, he'd just, crumble. He couldn't deal with setbacks at all because they challenged his whole belief in his innate ability.
So even with all that natural talent, his mindset was holding him back.
It was. It's crazy, right? And he actually had a teammate, Lenny Dykstra, who, arguably had less natural talent, but he ended up achieving way more success through, just sheer grit and determination. Dykstra's the poster boy for the growth mindset in action. He outworked everybody, embraced challenges, never let those setbacks define him.
So you're saying that someone with less raw talent could actually outperform someone like Bean simply because of their mindset?
Yeah, that's what Dweck's research suggests. And it really challenges that whole myth of the natural athlete.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and you see this over and over again. Think about Michael Jordan. A lot of people just chalk his success up to natural talent. But what they forget is his legendary work ethic, he was constantly pushing himself to get better, even when he was already at the top of his game.
Yeah, I've heard those stories about his, insane practice schedule. It sounds like he was almost obsessed with improving.
Exactly. And let's not forget about Babe Ruth, This idea of effort over talent. It wasn't just a modern thing. There's this misconception that Ruth just, effortlessly hit all those home runs. But in reality, he was incredibly dedicated to practice and fitness.
So it sounds like what you're saying is even those athletes that we consider naturally gifted, they still achieve greatness through this combination of talent and the right mindset. But what about those of us who weren't exactly born with, exceptional abilities? Can we still do, great things just by changing our mindset?
Now, that's a fantastic question, and it's something that Dweck really dives into. And she acknowledges that, changing those deeply ingrained beliefs about ourselves, it can be really, really tough.
But is it actually possible?
Oh, it is. And she has some really compelling examples of how, people have been able to make that transformation. One of the most striking stories is about a grad student who, after learning about the growth mindset, completely changed how she dealt with criticism.
So Instead of freaking out when she got negative feedback on her research papers, she started seeing it as useful information.
Yeah, exactly. Before that, she'd interpret any kind of criticism as like a judgment of her inherent abilities, like
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. But after understanding the growth mindset, she started to view those critiques as almost like a roadmap.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is how I can get better. Instead of feeling defeated, she felt empowered to do better next time.
So it's like she went from that I'm either smart or I'm not kind of thinking to like I can always learn and improve.
Yeah.
But how do we make that kind of shift happen on a larger scale? Is it even possible to teach kids about the growth mindset and see actual, lasting changes?
Well, Dweck's research was something called the Brainology program. It suggests that, yeah, it is possible. This program, it taught students that their brains are like muscles. They can actually be strengthened with effort and learning.
And did they actually see like lasting changes in those kids? Or was it just kind of a temporary boost?
Well, the results were pretty remarkable, actually. The students who went through the Brainology program, they showed more motivation, they got better grades, and they were even more likely to, embrace those challenges. It seemed like they really started to internalize that idea that their brains were capable of growth.
That's amazing. So it's not just about changing our own mindsets. It's also about kind of cultivating those beliefs in the people around us,
Especially kids.
right?
Absolutely. I think teaching kids about the power of effort, the importance of learning how to be resilient. I mean, it can have a huge impact on their lives. It's like giving them the tools to face those challenges head on, see mistakes as learning opportunities, and ultimately reach their full potential. But it's important to remember it's an ongoing process.
It's not like you learn about the growth mindset once and then, boom, you're set for life.
Right. You gotta keep reinforcing those beliefs, both in ourselves and in others, and create environments that really support growth and development. And that's something we can apply to, every part of our lives. As we've been talking, it really strikes me how much our mindsets influence how we deal with setbacks and criticism. This is where it gets real, right?
Yeah, totally. I remember you mentioned that you wanted to get better at handling those inevitable bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Both personally and professionally.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where the growth mindset can be so powerful. When people with fixed mindsets hit those roadblocks, they tend to see it as evidence of their limitations, like confirmation that they were right to be afraid. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yeah.
They give up easily because, well, they don't really believe they can improve.
But they're basically telling themselves see, I knew I wasn't good enough.
Exactly. Just reinforces that fixed mindset. But people with a growth mindset, they see setbacks totally differently. It's like an opportunity to learn, to adjust their strategies and come back even stronger.
Okay, so instead of throwing in the towel, they're thinking, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I approach it differently next time?
Exactly. And that resilience, that willingness to embrace those challenges and learn from mistakes, I mean, that's a real hallmark of the growth mindset. Dweck highlights this with some really interesting research on how kids with different mindsets approach difficult puzzles.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Didn't the kids with the fixed mindsets actually try to avoid the harder puzzles?
They did. As soon as the puzzles got more challenging, they lost all their enjoyment. Motivation just plummeted. They even tried to avoid taking the puzzles home to practice. And it wasn't because they were lazy or anything. It was almost like they were afraid of being exposed,
Yeah.
like having their smartness questioned.
Because if they couldn't solve it, it would mean they weren't smart enough.
Exactly. But the kids with the growth mindsets, they were totally different. They couldn't get enough of those challenging puzzles. They saw them as opportunities to stretch their minds, develop their problem-solving skills.
It's like they were actually excited by the challenge.
Exactly. And that difference in attitude, it's so crucial for success in really any field. It's not about pretending we don't make mistakes. It's about how we see them and what we do about them. You know what I mean?
Right. So if we want to cultivate a growth mindset, we have to change that inner dialogue, right? Start being so hard on ourselves and start embracing the learning process.
Totally. And one way to do that is to shift our focus from proving ourselves to improving ourselves. So instead of constantly needing that validation, for our inherent abilities, we can concentrate on developing our skills and expanding our knowledge.
So it's less about like being smart
Yeah.
and more about continuously getting smarter.
Exactly. And it can be incredibly liberating, actually. It frees us from that pressure to be perfect all the time, which, let's face it, is impossible.
Yeah.
And it lets us embrace the messy, sometimes frustrating, but ultimately rewarding process of learning and growth.
It kind of makes you wonder if some of those quote unquote humble leaders out there are actually just really good at hiding their fixed mindset, you know?
Ugh.
But seriously, this makes me think about how we praise kids. Like we're always told to praise effort, not ability. And now I'm starting to see why that's so important.
It's one of those things that seems so simple, but it really does have profound implications. Dweck's research shows that praising intelligence can actually backfire. It can make kids develop that fixed mindset, and then they're terrified of challenges. They're more likely to give up when things get tough.
Because they don't want to risk losing their smart label.
Yeah, exactly. But when we praise effort, it actually encourages that growth mindset. It's like we're teaching them that their abilities are malleable, that they can improve through hard work and persistence.
So instead of saying, you're so smart, we should say, wow, you worked really hard on that.
Right. It's about acknowledging the process, the strategies they use, the effort they put in. It reinforces that whole idea that learning and growth, they're ongoing journeys, not fixed destinations.
And that applies to adults too, right? The way we talk to ourselves can either reinforce a fixed mindset or help us cultivate a growth one.
Absolutely. We need to be more aware of our internal dialogue. Are we constantly putting ourselves down, focusing on all our limitations? Or are we encouraging ourselves, celebrating those small wins, and really truly focusing on that learning process?
It's like being our own coach, isn't it? Like we need to be able to cheer ourselves on and also, give ourselves that honest feedback.
I love that analogy. And just like any good coach, we need to find that balance between encouragement and honesty. Like where can I improve?
Totally. Now, you mentioned wanting to like actually apply these concepts to your work as a manager.
Mm.
And I think Dweck's research on leadership styles can be super helpful here. Remember we talked about CEO disease, basically that fixed mindset trap of needing to appear, like you're never wrong.
Right. And it's not just CEOs, You see with managers at all levels, these are the people who are so afraid of making a mistake that they just freeze up.
Oh, I've definitely worked for a few bosses like that. It creates such a stifling environment.
It does. And ultimately, it just hinders progress. Dweck contrasts those types with leaders like Darwin Smith, remember? He wasn't afraid to admit what he didn't know and was always looking for ways to learn and grow.
Right. And he actually surrounded himself with people who could challenge his thinking, push him to be better.
Exactly. And remember that study we talked about, the Enron type and Wurtzel type managers? It's such a great illustration of how these mindsets actually play out in, a business setting.
Yeah, the Enron types were all about protecting their egos and looking good, while the Wurtzel types were focused on collaboration and building a strong team.
Right. And it's important to remember that the researchers were actually able to create those Enron managers just by inducing a fixed mindset in those students.
So it really shows how powerful our beliefs can be, even in a professional context.
It's wild, right? It seems like leaders who have those growth mindsets, they create healthier and ultimately more successful organizations. It's not about being a genius who has all the answers. It's about, empowering your team to learn and grow and strive for excellence together.
It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
Where everyone feels safe to take risks, make mistakes, learn from each other.
Exactly. And that shift from I to we, I think that's a key differentiator between those fixed and growth mindset leaders.
That makes sense. So like, how can we start applying these principles in our own work lives? If someone's struggling with that fixed mindset, where do they even begin?
Well, I think the first step is awareness. We need to pay attention to those, fixed mindset thoughts and beliefs. Become aware of that inner voice that says things like, I'm not good at this, or I'll never be able to do that.
So it's about catching ourselves in those moments of self-judgment.
Exactly. And once we've kind of, identified those thoughts, we can start to reframe them. So instead of saying, I'm not good at math, we can say, I haven't mastered math yet, but I can learn and improve.
So it's about changing it from a statement of like permanence to a statement of potential. But isn't that just like positive self-talk?
It's more than that. It's about genuinely believing that we can grow. It's about adopting that learning orientation, seeing challenges as opportunities to stretch ourselves, develop our skills.
So it's about the process, not just the outcome.
Yes. Precisely. And it's also about being kind to ourselves along the way. We all make mistakes, and those mistakes are valuable feedback, not a reflection of our worth.
Speaking of feedback, I know that giving and receiving feedback effectively is something you've been wanting to get better at. Let's talk about how mindset plays into that.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the most powerful things about the growth mindset is that it makes us less defensive and more receptive to feedback. We start to see feedback as a chance to learn and grow instead of like a personal attack.
So instead of getting all bent out of shape when someone criticizes our work, we can think, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I use this feedback to improve?
Exactly. And when we're the ones giving feedback, it's so important to focus on the process, not just the outcome. So instead of just saying, great job, or this needs work, we can provide specific feedback on the effort, the strategies, the areas where we see improvement.
So instead of saying, this report is poorly written, we might say, hey, I noticed you haven't cited your sources consistently. Let's work on developing a system for keeping track of your research.
Exactly. It's about giving constructive criticism that helps the person learn and grow instead of making them feel, defeated or defensive.
Now, let's circle back to relationships for a minute.
Hmm.
You mentioned wanting to understand how to, spot those mindset clashes we talked about earlier. Dweck tells this story about a woman named Penelope who kept finding flaws in otherwise perfect partners.
Yeah, Penelope's story, it's a classic example of how that fixed mindset can really sabotage relationships. She was so focused on finding someone who met all her, idealized standards that she missed out on opportunities to actually connect with someone on a deeper level.
So she was basically looking for a flawless human being.
Pretty much. And she couldn't see past any imperfection because she believed those flaws were like permanent and unchangeable. And that belief led her to reject, a whole series of potentially great partners. It's kind of sad. It's a reminder of how a fixed mindset can really limit our possibilities, and keep us from experiencing true fulfillment.
Okay, so how can we avoid falling into that trap?
Well, I think it starts with accepting that no one is perfect, including ourselves. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and it's those imperfections that make us unique.
Interesting.
It's about embracing those differences and focusing on what we appreciate about our partners instead of getting hung up on their flaws.
And remembering that we're all works in progress. We're all constantly learning, growing, evolving.
So it's not about finding that perfect partner. It's about choosing to grow together, both as individuals and as a couple.
That's beautifully put. And that journey of growth and development, when you approach it with a growth mindset, it can be so rewarding, and it can ultimately lead to a much deeper, more meaningful connection. But I think we also need to talk about the role of communication in, navigating those inevitable differences that come up in any relationship.
Right. I remember you saying that communication was something you wanted to work on in your own relationships. It's so crucial. And I think a growth mindset can really help us become better communicators. Like when we approach conversations with a willingness to understand our partner's perspective, even if we don't agree with it, it just creates this much safer and more productive space for dialogue.
So instead of getting all defensive or trying to win the argument, we're really trying to listen and understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. And it's also about being willing to share our own needs and feelings, in a clear and respectful way.
So it's about creating that open and honest communication where we can be vulnerable with each other without feeling judged.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it's important to remember that conflict is inevitable in any relationship, but it's how we approach those conflicts that really matters.
So instead of seeing those disagreements as a threat, we can see them as opportunities to learn more about each other and even strengthen our bond.
Exactly. And I think that shift in perspective is much easier to make when we're coming from that growth mindset, when we believe that we can actually learn and grow from those sometimes difficult conversations.
Now, you also mentioned that you sometimes struggle with self-esteem issues, especially when you compare yourself to others. Do you think mindsets play a role in that too?
Oh, absolutely. Dweck explains that people with fixed mindsets, they often base their self-esteem on external validation. Like they need constant reassurance that they're smart or talented or successful.
So their sense of worth is kind of fragile. It depends on how other people see them.
Exactly. And when they encounter setbacks or criticism, their self-esteem just plummets because it challenges that whole belief in their inherent abilities.
But those with a growth mindset, they find their self-esteem from the process of learning and growing.
Exactly. Their sense of worth doesn't depend on getting a pat on the back. It comes from the effort they put in, the challenges they overcome, the progress they make.
So their self-esteem is more stable, more resilient, because it's not tied to like specific outcomes or what other people think.
That's a great way to put it. They're not as worried about being the best or being perfect. They're more focused on being their best selves and constantly improving.
And that focus on growth and development, it can be really empowering.
It really can. It frees us from that constant need to compare ourselves to others and lets us focus on our own unique journey.
Dweck shares this story about a guy who felt threatened by his girlfriend's popularity.
The one where the hotel staff and even the taxi driver recognized and praised her?
Yes, he couldn't handle her being, the center of attention because it made him feel insecure about himself.
It's a perfect example of how that fixed mindset can lead to, like, insecurity and jealousy in relationships. He was so focused on comparing himself to his girlfriend that he couldn't just appreciate her accomplishments and celebrate her success.
If he'd had a growth mindset, he could have seen her popularity as a reflection of, her awesome qualities.
Totally. And he could have focused on developing his own unique strengths, his own accomplishments, recognizing that his worth wasn't dependent on being better than his partner.
It's a good reminder that, like, our partner's success doesn't diminish our own.
Right. It's about celebrating each other's wins and supporting each other's growth instead of getting stuck in that competitive mindset where it's like, us against them.
It's funny because we often think of competition as like a motivator, but it sounds like it can actually be really harmful, especially if we're operating from that fixed mindset.
That's a great point. When we see the world as this like zero-sum game where one person's win is another person's loss, it creates this scarcity mentality that can cause all sorts of problems, not just in our relationships, but also in our careers and other areas of life.
But a growth mindset allows us to see the world as a place of abundance, where there's room for everyone to succeed.
Exactly. It lets us appreciate and learn from the successes of others instead of feeling threatened by them. And that shift in perspective can be incredibly powerful.
So it's about moving from that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. But how do we actually make that shift? It's easy to say, don't be so competitive, but it's a lot harder to actually change those ingrained ways of thinking.
It's definitely a process, and it takes effort. But I think one of the most important things is to become aware of the messages we're getting, from our culture, from our families, and even from that inner voice in our head. Are those messages reinforcing the idea that there's only so much success to go around? Or are they encouraging that belief that we can all achieve great things without, putting others down?
So it's about being more aware of the stories we're telling ourselves about success and failure, about competition and collaboration.
Exactly. And it's about actively seeking out experiences and relationships that support a growth mindset.
Like surrounding ourselves with people who believe in collaboration and celebrate each other's wins.
That's such a good point. The people we spend our time with, they have a huge impact on our beliefs and behaviors. If we're always around people who are, cutthroat and competitive, it's going to be much harder to develop that growth mindset.
But if we surround ourselves with people who are supportive and encouraging, who believe in collaboration and actually celebrate each other's successes, it just makes it so much easier to change our own thinking.
I love that. It's about creating a community of growth-minded individuals who lift each other up and inspire each other to be their best selves. And I think that's a beautiful vision to strive for, both in our personal lives and in our workplaces.
Now, you're also a parent, so you are really interested in how these mindsets play out in parenting. Dweck talks about how our own mindsets as parents can actually influence our kids' beliefs about themselves and their abilities.
It's true. It's such a powerful influence. And it's not just what we say to them. It's how we act, how we react to their successes and their failures, the messages we send them, both directly and indirectly.
So if we're always praising them for being smart, we might be accidentally encouraging that fixed mindset.
Yeah, exactly. We're teaching them that their intelligence is this fixed trait, something to be proud of, but also something to be protected. And that can make them afraid to take risks, afraid of failure, and more likely to just give up when things get tough.
But if we praise their effort, their strategies, their perseverance, then we're encouraging that growth mindset. We're teaching them that they can get better through hard work and dedication.
And that belief can have such a huge impact on their lives, not just in school, but in everything they do. It gives them the resilience and perseverance they need to face challenges head on, see their mistakes as opportunities to learn, and ultimately, reach their full potential.
Dweck tells that great story about Elizabeth and her first gymnastics meet. Her dad helped her reframe her disappointment after she, didn't perform as well as she'd hoped.
It's such a good example of how we can teach kids about the growth mindset. Instead of like, babying her or brushing off her disappointment, her dad acknowledged her feelings, and then he helped her understand that success takes effort and dedication.
He helped her shift her focus from the outcome to the process. And I bet that was a really valuable lesson for her, even beyond gymnastics.
Totally. It's a lesson that can be applied to anything. It's about understanding that we're all capable of growth and improvement, but it takes effort, persistence, and a willingness to, embrace those challenges and learn from our mistakes. And I think one of the most important things we can do as parents is to model that growth mindset ourselves.
So it's about walking the walk.
Yeah, exactly. Our kids are watching us. They learn from what we do. If we're always complaining about how hard things are or giving up easily when we hit a snag, they're going to pick up on that. But if we approach challenges with a positive attitude, a willingness to learn, and that determination to keep trying, they're going to learn those lessons too.
So it's about showing them that we believe in the power of effort, the importance of learning, the value of resilience.
Exactly. And that kind of authentic modeling combined with, consistent encouragement and support, it can create such a powerful foundation for our kids to develop their own growth mindsets and thrive in all aspects of their lives.
Now, we've talked about teachers, but I think coaches play a really similar role in shaping young people's mindsets, especially when it comes to sports. Dweck talks about how a coach's mindset can have a huge impact on an athlete's performance and their overall well-being.
Absolutely. Coaches have that power to inspire and motivate, to guide their athletes toward achieving their full potential, but they can also accidentally instill fear and self-doubt and that fixed mindset that limits their athletes' growth.
And a lot of times it comes down to, the coach's own beliefs about talent, effort, and success.
Exactly. A coach with a fixed mindset might just focus on winning, emphasizing natural talent and only praising those athletes who are consistently performing at a high level. And that creates a culture of fear and anxiety where athletes are afraid to make mistakes or take risks or challenge themselves because, well, they don't want to disappoint the coach or lose their spot on the team.
So it becomes all about the outcome, not the process.
Right. But a coach with a growth mindset, they're going to prioritize learning and development, They'll focus on the process, not just the outcome. They'll encourage their athletes to embrace challenges, learn from their mistakes, and keep striving for improvement no matter what their current skill level is.
So they're not just looking for the star players. They want to help everyone on the team reach their full potential.
Exactly. And that kind of coaching environment, one that's fostered by a growth mindset that can be so empowering for athletes. It lets them focus on their own personal development, push their limits, and really experience the joy of learning and improving without that constant pressure to be perfect or, prove their worth.
Dweck tells a great story about John Wooden, the legendary UCLA basketball coach.
Yeah.
He wasn't just obsessed with winning games. He was also focused on developing his players as people, both on and off the court.
Wooden was a true master of the growth mindset. And he didn't just talk about it, he lived it, He believed that every player, no matter how talented they were, had the potential to improve and contribute to the team's success.
And that coaching philosophy, which was really rooted in a growth mindset, it created this culture of excellence where players felt challenged and supported and empowered to reach their full potential. I bet that's a big part of why he was so successful.
I think so too. He created an environment where players felt safe to take risks, make mistakes, learn from each other. They knew their coach believed in them, and that belief gave them the confidence to really push themselves beyond their perceived limitations.
Now, we've talked about how coaches can foster that growth mindset in their athletes, but how can we as individuals cultivate it in our own lives? Even if we're not, athletes, we still face challenges and setbacks all the time.
That's so true. And I think one of the most important things is to reframe how we think about challenges. Instead of seeing them as threats, we can view them as opportunities to learn and grow.
So instead of saying, I can't do this, we can say, this is going to be tough, but I'm going to give it my best shot and, learn as much as I can along the way.
Exactly. It's about shifting from that fixed mindset of I'm either good at this or I'm not to that growth mindset of I can get better if I put in the effort and keep trying. And we have to remember that mistakes are part of the process. They're not failures. They're valuable feedback that helps us figure out, okay, what can I do better?
So instead of beating ourselves up when we mess up, we can try to ask ourselves, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I improve for next time?
I love that. It's about embracing those mistakes as opportunities to grow instead of seeing them as proof that we're not good enough. And it's also important to celebrate our progress no matter how small. Every step forward, every new skill, every challenge we overcome, it's a victory worth celebrating.
It's about acknowledging how far we've come instead of just focusing on how far we still have to go.
Exactly. And that focus on progress, on that journey of learning and growing, that can be incredibly motivating. It helps us stay engaged, even when things get tough, because we're not just focused on the destination, we're enjoying the process too.
Dweck shares this really inspiring story about Christopher Reeve. After his horse riding accident, he was told he'd never walk again. But he refused to accept those limitations. He dedicated himself to rehab.
It's such a testament to the human spirit. Despite facing something unimaginable, he refused to give up. He embraced this rigorous exercise program, challenged what the doctors were saying, and he actually regained some movement.
His story is such a powerful reminder that, our mindset can actually shape our reality. When we believe we can grow and change, it opens up possibilities that we might have otherwise dismissed.
It's about choosing to focus on what's possible, embracing those challenges, and striving for improvement no matter what. And I think that's a message that speaks to all of us, whether we're facing some major life challenge or just navigating those everyday ups and downs.
Now, let's talk about passion and purpose for a minute. Dweck suggests that when we find something we're really passionate about, something that aligns with our values and gives us a sense of purpose, we're more likely to embrace that growth mindset and persevere through those challenges.
There's definitely a connection there. When we're driven by passion and purpose, we're more likely to see those obstacles as something we can overcome, to see setbacks as temporary, and to see criticism as valuable feedback. And it's because we're not just doing it for the recognition or to impress other people. We're doing it because it matters to us, because it aligns with who we are and what we believe in.
It's like we're tapping into a deeper source of motivation, and resilience.
Exactly. And that sense of purpose, it can fuel our willingness to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones, to keep going even when things get tough.
Dweck shares this remarkable story about Laura Hillenbrand, the author of Seabiscuit. She wrote that whole book while she was battling chronic fatigue syndrome. It's an amazing example of how passion and purpose can fuel perseverance.
Hillenbrand's story is so inspiring. She was bedridden for years, struggling with debilitating fatigue and pain. But her passion for the story of Seabiscuit, the underdog racehorse, it kept her going. She found purpose in sharing that story with the world, and that gave her the strength to overcome her physical limitations and achieve something truly incredible.
It's a testament to the power of the human spirit and the transformative potential of finding something that we're truly passionate about. But how do we find that thing, that thing that lights us up and gives us a sense of meaning and direction? I know you mentioned feeling a bit lost when it comes to, your career path.
It's something a lot of people struggle with, and I think a growth mindset can really help us navigate those feelings of uncertainty. It starts with self-reflection, taking the time to think about our values, our interests, our aspirations. What are we passionate about? What kind of impact do we want to make on the world?
And it's about being open to experimentation, too,
Yeah.
right? Trying new things, exploring different paths, and seeing what feels right.
Exactly. It might take some trial and error, some exploration and discovery, but that journey of finding our passion, our purpose, it can be incredibly rewarding in itself.
It's about embracing the unknown instead of being afraid of it.
I love that. And it's so important to remember that our passions and our purpose, they can change over time. What excites us today might be different from what we're passionate about 5 or 10 years from now.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Beautifully said. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about life. We're constantly growing, evolving, discovering new possibilities. And when we embrace that journey with that growth mindset, it opens us up to a whole world of opportunity.
Now, you also mentioned wanting to get better at, dealing with procrastination and staying focused on your goals. Do you think mindsets play a role in that too?
Oh, absolutely. Procrastination is often rooted in that fear of failure, that fixed mindset belief that we're not capable of doing the task well, so we just avoid it altogether.
So it's like we're trying to protect our ego by not even trying.
Yeah, exactly. And it can become this vicious cycle. The more we avoid something, the more anxious we feel about it, and the more likely we are to keep procrastinating.
But a growth mindset can help us break out of that cycle.
Totally. When we approach a task with that growth mindset, we see it as an opportunity to learn and grow, not a test of our worth.
So instead of focusing on that fear of failing, We're focusing on the potential for learning and improvement.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can make a huge difference in how willing we are to, tackle those challenging tasks and stay focused on what we want to achieve.
Dweck emphasizes that importance of effort and learning. She says that when we focus on the process of learning and improving, rather than just the outcome, we're more likely to, embrace those challenges and persevere when things get tough.
It's about finding joy in the journey, in the process of learning and growing and striving towards our goals.
This makes me think about those students in the brainology program, the ones who learn that their brains are like muscles that can be strengthened with effort and learning.
Those students, they showed such amazing improvements in their motivation, their effort, their academic performance, because they finally understood that their intelligence wasn't fixed. It was something they could actively develop and grow.
It really is amazing how much, like, what we believe about intelligence can affect how much we're willing to, actually learn and grow.
It's incredibly powerful, and it just shows how important it is to shift our focus from, just natural ability to effort and learning, both in education and, in life generally.
So it's not about being smart. It's about getting smarter.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It's about embracing that process of continuous improvement, recognizing that we can always learn and grow no matter where we're starting from.
Greg gives a lot of real-world examples to like illustrate this, right? I'm thinking of the story about Michael Jordan and his insane work ethic. He's often praised for his natural talent, but he was also known for like constantly trying to improve.
Jordan's a perfect example of someone who didn't just sit back and, rely on his natural gifts. He understood that talent alone wasn't going to get him to greatness. He had to put in those hours, push himself, and embrace the challenges and yeah, the failures along the way.
It's inspiring to see that kind of dedication, even from someone who's, already considered one of the best. But what about those of us who don't have that level of natural talent? Can we still achieve, great things just through hard work?
That's a great question. And I think Dweck's research really shows that, yes, we can. Remember, she says that effort and learning, those are the keys to unlocking our potential, regardless of our starting point. She talks about Babe Ruth. Even he, despite his legendary status, understood that success requires hard work and discipline.
Wait, so he wasn't just like this natural who hit all those home runs without even trying?
No, not at all. He practiced all the time, focused on his fitness, and even adapted his approach over time to stay on top. His success was a testament to his dedication and his perseverance. It wasn't just about natural ability.
It's encouraging to see that even those people we see as naturals often achieve success through, a combination of talent and hard work. But let's talk about how we can like develop a greater appreciation for effort and perseverance in our own lives. I know we both mentioned struggling with procrastination and wanting to find ways to stay more focused on our goals.
We did. And a growth mindset can be so helpful in overcoming those challenges. One key is to set realistic goals, Break down those bigger goals into smaller, more manageable steps. That can help us stay motivated and not feel so overwhelmed by the sheer size of the task.
So instead of trying to write an entire book in a month, maybe we focus on writing a chapter each week.
Exactly. And it's important to actually have a plan for achieving those goals. Like identify the steps we need to take, the resources we might need, and the support systems we need to build. Having that clear plan can help us stay focused and on track even when things get tough.
It's like having a roadmap for our journey.
That's a great way to put it. And I think it's also super important to celebrate our progress as we go. Acknowledge those achievements no matter how small they seem. That can help us stay motivated and reinforce that belief that our efforts are actually paying off. It's about finding joy in the process, in the learning and growing and working towards our goals.
So instead of just focusing on the destination, we're appreciating the scenery along the way.
Exactly. And that appreciation for the journey, for the effort and the learning that's happening, that can make such a big difference in how willing we are to keep going and ultimately, reach our goals.
Dweck talks a lot about the power of belief, and that really stuck with me. She says that what we believe about ourselves, about our abilities, it can actually shape our reality.
It's a really powerful idea. Our beliefs can become self-fulfilling prophecies. If we believe we're capable of something, we're more likely to put in the work and stick with it even when it gets hard. But if we believe we're limited, well, then we're more likely to just give up or avoid those challenges altogether. And a lot of times these beliefs come from our early experiences, the messages we got from our parents, our teachers, our coaches growing up.
I remember you mentioned that you were often praised for your intelligence as a child and how that might have actually contributed to, some of those fixed mindset tendencies you have.
Yeah, it definitely did. I was always the smart one, and while that felt good back then, it also made me afraid to try new things or take risks because I didn't want to mess up that label.
It's interesting how those messages that seem positive on the surface can sometimes have, unintended negative consequences.
It's a good reminder to be really careful about the messages we send to kids, verbally and just in how we act around them. It's about encouraging effort, celebrating progress, and fostering that growth mindset that helps them believe in their own potential.
Dweck tells this story about two boys in preschool. One was always praised for being smart, and the other was praised for his effort. And the results of, how they reacted to challenges later on were really different.
They were. The boy who was always told he was smart ended up avoiding challenges and actually didn't do as well on tasks later on. But the boy who was praised for his effort, he embraced the challenges and showed a lot of improvement.
Wow. It's pretty amazing how just those small differences in the messages they received had such a big impact on, how they behaved.
It shows just how important it is to praise the process, the effort, the strategies, not just the outcome. We want to encourage kids to see learning as a journey, not a destination.
So we've talked about the importance of effort, but what about resilience? How can we develop that inner strength that helps us bounce back from setbacks and just keep moving forward?
Resilience is so important for navigating all those ups and downs that life throws at us. And like a lot of things, we can actually build resilience by using a growth mindset. One key is to change how we think about those setbacks. So instead of seeing them as personal failures, we can try to view them as temporary obstacles or even as opportunities to learn and grow.
So it's about shifting our thinking from, why is this happening to me, to what can I learn from this?
Exactly. And it's also about finding healthy ways to deal with stress and those tough times, whether that's exercise, meditation, spending time outdoors, connecting with loved ones. Finding those healthy coping strategies can help us stay resilient when those challenges inevitably come up.
It's about creating a toolkit of resources that we can use when things get tough.
I like that. It's like building a mental and emotional first aid kit for those bumps in the road.
And it's important to remember that we don't have to go through tough times alone, right? Reaching out to friends, family, or even a therapist can give us the support and encouragement we need to get through difficult situations.
Absolutely. We're social creatures. There's no shame in asking for help when you need it. Actually, I think it's a sign of strength and self-awareness.
Dweck shares that inspiring story about Patricia Miranda, the wrestler who was told she was a joke after a really bad loss. But instead of letting that define her, she used it as motivation to work even harder and prove those people wrong.
Miranda's story is such a powerful example of resilience. She embraced the challenges, learned from her mistakes, and never gave up on that dream of winning an Olympic medal. And she did it.
It just shows that we all have the potential for greatness inside us, but sometimes it takes facing those setbacks, going through those challenges to really tap into it.
That's a great way to put it. And it starts with believing in ourselves, believing that we can grow and change.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of mindsets, it's pretty clear that what we believe has a huge impact on our lives. Whether it's believing in our own abilities, believing in the power of effort and learning, or believing in our ability to grow and change, those beliefs really do shape our reality.
They influence our choices, our actions, and yeah, what we ultimately accomplish.
And the good news is that those beliefs, those mindsets, they're not set in stone. They can be changed. It might take effort and time. But by understanding how mindsets work and making that conscious choice to adopt a growth mindset, we can unlock our potential and achieve amazing things.
I hope this deep dive has given you some useful insights and some tools to start applying these ideas to your own life. Remember, you talked about wanting to improve your leadership skills, strengthen your relationships, and cultivate greater resilience and self-esteem.
We explored how a growth mindset can help you achieve all of those things, from changing how you talk to yourself to embracing challenges as opportunities to grow.
It's about shifting your focus from trying to prove yourself to trying to improve yourself, and recognizing that the journey of learning and growth, well, that's just as valuable as reaching the destination.
We encourage you to think about the stories we talked about today and to ask yourself, in what areas of your life are you maybe holding yourself back with a fixed mindset? Where could you embrace that growth mindset and open up some new possibilities for yourself?
Remember, you have the power to change your mindset, to change your reality. It all starts with you.
So embrace the challenge, believe in yourself, and never stop growing.